Yeah, I was hoping to actually meet many of you last night at dinner, but virus has had other plans for me. But I didn't want to miss this opportunity to talk about, well, my favorite kind of animal, which is a snake. And I think if I can, I always hear some murmurs in the crowd whenever the word snake is mentioned. So what do you guys feel when you hear about snakes? Or if you, heaven forbid, were to see a snake in your backyard, what would you feel? Okay. I heard happy. Yes.
Too much of noise so that it doesn't move anywhere and then call snake sham to catch.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I remember actually meeting a very young, still as colorful snake charm for the first time 26 or 27 years ago. And I do have to say that, with all the rescuers around the country now, snake charm does stand out as someone who started when it didn't mean anything and when it was very difficult. So I will always hold him in high regard for how much he did back in the day when it was very difficult. I mean, even to fill fuel in his auto. I remember that auto with the 1,700 stickers of all kinds of things, including aspirational Indian rupee to dollar conversions. So, but I'm here to talk about living with snakes and tolerance, and I think that's something that in today's day and age, even with the best of intentions, we've sort of thrown tolerance out the window. Now, if you look at a snake, and I think most of it was like, oh, there's a snake here, and the best of intentions that we feel in the country are, let's find another place for it. Unfortunately, you can't do that without almost certainly killing the snake. So when you move a snake from one place to another, you almost certainly kill it. Something just gets short-circuited. And when I found out that for the first time, it made me feel, well, quite awful and very small, because until then I thought I was this, really noble person doing so much good stuff. Whenever anyone called me, I was going this, to rescue the people and rescue the snake, and I was doing such a great job. The problem is that I actually had inadvertently sentenced thousands of snakes to death. And I think that's where a lot of our, especially true in India, where we look at intent more than we look at result. And I think when it's just for us and our own aspirations or our own targets, that's fine. But when it means something else or someone or something else's life or well-being, I think we bear more responsibility there, and we at least should bear more responsibility. So everyone talks about coexistence, and I think coexistence comes from not saying, okay, I'll allow this thing to live, but saying that I will live with this thing. And that, I think, is a big difference in how we can make things better from every standpoint. I mean, we tolerate very little. I've received calls from new layouts where they say, there's a lot of frogs, and in the monsoons they're very loud. Yeah, that's what that's where that's where they've been all this time. But none of these animals ever signed the sale deed. So, and if we look at ownership, well, we are probably the only species on the planet that thinks ownership of something else. So it's kind of unfair on that front as well to constantly enforce our enforce our capitalism pretty much on other wildlife and other species. So what I would really like to do today is have a bit more of a back and forth about how we can probably bring this about and stop taxing snake charm so much, because just the other day, before he was actually going to do his book launch, he called and asked me if I was coming, and I was like, I can't, I've got this terrible viral, and I was hoping to be better by now, but I'm not. But But he told me that that day he had done 18 calls already. So if you look at the carbon footprint that our fear of snakes is inadvertently, stomping on our ecosystem, it's very, very high. Um, I'd like to tell you a little story about my beginning with watching snakes. Um, and I think this is very relevant to understanding how the difference between, snakes and humans versus everything else. Bird watchers don't want to catch birds. Tiger spotters definitely don't want to catch the tigers. But for some reason, when it comes to snakes, it's about grabbing them. But when I couldn't have been more than 6 years old, I'd already developed a really deep fondness for snakes, but I was still very scared of them because of everything that everyone was saying around me. Everyone except my grandfather, that was. And my grandfather and I were walking to the pump shed at our farm in Bangalore back then, and we saw a cobra crossing the road, and it stopped, and I sort of pulled back, and my granddad, in his true fashion, just put his arm on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it'll go away." And the snake sort of half lifted its head, looked at us, and it went away. And I learned in that moment that I could very safely watch snakes. And I think that did me a lot of good and gave me a much deeper insight than, responding to the knee-jerk and, testosterone-fueled response of running after the snake and capturing it. So I saw all kinds of really cool things. I saw snakes, hunting, mating, escaping predation, all kinds of really wonderful behaviors that you don't get to see. And through this time, I think what happened in between, especially in my teen years, is that I was getting so much adulation because I could catch snakes that sort of overran everything else, and it smothered any other interest or any other possible channel. But it was only about being able to catch snakes. And I've seen, then it went on to being in television for a while. And again, it was only that, catching snakes and then having some excuse to catch the snake. Oh, he's catching snakes because he needs this, to do some research. And it's usually a really loose, anything that sort of can pass as research. Or he's saving the snake and he's going to relocate it to a better place. But those were more excuses to capture snakes. And if you look at, when I look back at those things, it's hard to now because I didn't keep any of them. It's sort of the kind of stuff that you don't want to remember. But my time in television was almost certainly the worst time of my life. I achieved very little. I contributed even less. And the only thing that I was doing was, just sort of promoting myself, which is what is still the case with many interactions with snakes. And for some reason, it's seen as a very cool thing. But it's only cool because many people here are scared of snakes, right? But would you climb on a bamboo scaffolding 7 stories high, lashed together with coir rope? No, but that construction worker, he's functionally and statistically doing a much more dangerous thing than catching most snakes. Would you get into a car with someone who regularly crashes up? No, but for some reason, a guy who catches snakes wears the number of times he's been bitten as a badge of honor. But if that's your job, then don't mess up so often. It's as simple as that. It's a lot more dangerous, especially with this new expressway, to drive to Bangalore and back than to handle a snake, statistically and functionally. But we will do that in a heartbeat without thinking twice at all. So it's the only reason capturing or handling snakes is cool is because most people don't do it, right? But as a child in the village next door to our farm, I have seen an elderly very loud woman, sweep a cobra out of her house and then get back to threshing her grain, It was just as simple as that. There's a cobra, and then back to this. And her grandson goes into orbit at the sight of the smallest snake. And I really feel that it's media, and you know, we self-serving snake men and snake women. Unfortunately, there aren't as many snake women as there should be, because I think that they would actually do a much better job, and by and large they do. Um, the it's quite my mentor Rom and I have this saying. I guess we'll call it a saying because we give ourselves more credit than is due. That there are three liquids that don't mix well together, and that's venom, alcohol, and testosterone. And by and large, I feel that women are much better handlers of snakes because of a greater sense of empathy. And if we started thinking like that more, I feel that there might be fewer guys working with snakes because it won't be as cool as anything else. And they'll go back to riding motorbikes without helmets and wearing the helmets on their elbows. But truth be told, the only reason we can handle a snake is because that snake doesn't want to bite us. If we were that snake's food, there is not a human on this planet who'd be able to get out of the way in time. The snake does not want to spend its very valuable venom on someone who he can't or she can't eat. So venom is fundamentally used to subdue prey. And the reason we have 1.4 billion people in this country is because snakes don't want to bite us. The snake's world doesn't revolve around us. We are a very new addition, especially in the urban setting. We're a very new addition to snake biology and ecology. And whichever snake, whether be it a Russell's viper or a grass snake or a large rock python, all of them have spent millions of years evolving to best adapt to whichever situation and ecosystem they're in. Some snakes do really well around us, and they're like the crows and the pigeons of the snake world. The spectacle cobra, unfortunately, is one of them. And it just loves us, not because of our personalities, but because of our filth. And we have so much dirt, and that dirt attracts so many rats. The way we live, the kind of sanitation we have, that is really a great place for the spectacle cobra. The spectacle cobra, also being one of the most famous and photographed snakes on the planet, enables snake rescuers or snake catchers. But since we're in a literary forum, I think what we can talk about is having some dedication and commitment to honest vocabulary. So when we say rescue, it should mean that we've saved something. When we say danger, it should actually mean something. Or we need to be clear that, this is just a perception of danger. So I think if we called it snake removal or snake capture or any of those things, we'd actually be more honest about it. It isn't rescue, because we're most likely killing the snake. And I think the final point that I'd really like to make is we talk about, wildlife and us being separate. So we say, oh, this snake was caught in so-and-so industry, or Hebbal industrial area, and we've released it back into its natural habitat. The truth is, if that snake was found in a toilet, that was its natural habitat. That's what it lives in. And just because, wildlands are not, they should not be sacrosanct and separate from us. We should really be part of it. That's what coexistence is. And that's how many a tribe folk live for as long as they were allowed to before they were removed from forest areas in our country. But that's how they lived, and that's what coexistence really is. And in that, in being able to say, oh, there's a cobra, and I know it doesn't want to do anything to me, so my responsibility then and my, what I should be doing is just focusing on not stepping on it or not picking it up by mistake, or, if I'm heading out at night, I can use a torch or just be a little careful. They're a lot safer to have around than most people. So I would like to rescue a lot of people, actually, and put them back in their natural habitat. But Uh, but maybe not all that many people, but there are some. I can probably name them. But um, I think if we can talk about, just let's start discussing, Mysore and snakes. There's a lot of snakes. And Snake Sham's petrol bill will be a testament to that. So how do we stop doing this? How do we actually enable true conservation and true rescue? And I'm not saying that there is no dangerous situation with a snake around. If there's a Russell's viper in a school and there are kids, running all over the place, that is a potentially dangerous situation. The snake can actually be removed from the situation without actually removing it from the location. And sometimes, yes, we do need to move a snake. But that should not be touted as a great conservation effort, because it isn't. That's the worst of the evils, or the least of the evils that we had a choice of. But by and large, there is no reason to move a rat snake or a checkered keelback or a striped keelback or a vine snake. Just to be clear here, vine snakes do not peck your eyes out, and they do not drill holes in your head. That long, slender snout that they have is actually so fragile that if it tried to peck your eyes out, it would break. The actual reason it has that snout is actually so much more spectacular than it's going to peck my eyes out. It's actually there because it gives that snake, one of the only species of snakes in the world, to have binocular vision. Because otherwise the eyes are on two sides of the head and the brain needs to process two separate images. But this is a snake that lives in trees in a very three-dimensional space and habitat. So binocular vision helps it judge distances, helps it aim better, and while it's doing that, it also makes it look more like a vine. So that evolution is, at least to me, much more spectacular and wondrous than it's going to peck your eyes out. So I think also as storytellers, we could maybe push ourselves, if we're going to come up with myths about snakes, come up with something slightly more imaginative than that. So yes, are there any questions, thoughts, tomatoes? Yes.
Why do you say that by relocating a snake, almost
So one of the big difficulties with studying snakes is to be able to follow the same snake. But with the advent of radio telemetry, we're able to do that. And studies done in Australia, Africa, America, and India, we've seen that whichever species have actually been studied, when they are relocated or translocated to another place, something just short circuits and they move into a very frenzied, poor choiced existence, and they plummet very fast. One Russell's viper that we had to move during our telemetry study, we saw that it just was exposed all the time. For months, it was just fortunate to not get killed, or maybe it didn't get killed because we were tracking it. But it eventually just literally withered away, and it was still alive, but could not move. It had gone down to almost paper thin. And that's the kind of death, painful, slow death that it experiences. King cobras that were translocated in Agumbe, they went into a ridiculous frenzy. And the only thing we could actually, the only reason we felt that they would go into that frenzy is they were looking for something familiar, and they couldn't find it. One large male crossed this one small road about 14 times within an hour, just going one way, looking and coming back this way, as opposed to a resident king cobra who, would be slowly moving along a stream, sniffing at something, and then just stopping mid-sentence, just waiting for stuff, then waking up again, going around. And that calm of knowing where that snake was. As we've seen resident snakes wake up, go about 400 meters, drink water, come back, and then go on with their day. So they know their space. It's not just the habitat. They do know their particular range. And I think moving them out of their range sort of just makes them snap. So, and it's really heart-wrenching to watch.
I have a practical question.
Okay, yes.
What would you do if you found a cobra in your toilet? It
Move
happens to me.
Yeah, move it outside the toilet, because although the cobras have been proven to be very good laxatives. So, yeah. But I think, yeah, so that's a clear example of where it's in a dangerous situation. But a cobra doesn't visit your toilet every day, right? It's an occasional thing. So a good thing to do would be to allow that cobra to learn that the toilet isn't a safe space for it as well, and chase it out of the toilet. It probably won't come back, at least not for the next few weeks. So. Oh, that sounds like a very good laxative, actually. Yeah. The concept of a cobra in your toilet is probably a lot scarier than, actually being able to see a cobra. But then, so I would actually call Snake Sham or someone like that to move it outside the house. So a snake, the thing is, it's not just one snake that's around. If you see a cobra, this is good and bad news, but if you see one cobra, it's not that there's one cobra around there. There's dozens. There's lots of them. It's just that cobra that you've seen that day. So the bad news is that there are dozens. The good news is also that there are dozens and you don't get to see them. That's how much snakes are trying and working at staying out of your way. And there are... cobras don't do as well as they do in cities out in the wild. If you go to a pristine habitat, you won't see this many cobras. Here in the city, there's hardly any competition, there's hardly any predation. They just do really well, and there's pretty much Swiggy delivering their food right up to their doorsteps, or your doorsteps. So it's a great place for cobras and rat snakes and checkered keelbacks. Not so great for other snakes. In fact, even if you speak with Snake Sham, now he will possibly lament about how many wonderful snake species he used to find earlier. Banded racers, more vine snakes, bronzeback tree snakes, various species of wolf snakes and kukris. Nowadays, it's primarily just cobras, rat snakes, and that's because we've removed the heterogeneity of our space. It's all, it does so. Which is why it's also very difficult to answer a question about snakes in general, because it's like saying, what do birds do? Or, what do mammals do? And they are so diverse, and each species has developed and evolved into such a, aside from cobras, who are a lot more, adaptable, and they'll eat anything and live anywhere. So they're not even the coolest of the snakes. They're like your standard average snake. So, but there's so many other much cooler snakes as well.
Gerry, I want to share an experience.
Yes.
It's very nice. We live in a farm, and I can say I live with snakes. Mostly we find snakes, and earlier in the village side, people had this thing, if you see a snake, kill it. So I had to educate the entire village people, saying that you cannot kill a snake, allow it to live there. Just tell the snake to move away, it knows. They used to mock at me, and I've shown them. Like, many times we have a boundary of our house. So I tell the snakes when they come there, I just tap on the floor and tell them, you cannot come here. Your area is that side, go. And I've seen it, and my gardener has seen it and said, Sir, Nivo, idratra matartira. I said, you need to learn to talk to them because they're like you.
Yes.
This is one of the examples I was wanting to share.
Absolutely, you and Harry Potter. Yes, tapping the floor in front of it is a very useful thing to do, and I think speaking to the snake helps us more than it helps the snake because it can't hear us. However, there are some snakes that will actually coil up and try and hide in response to trapping, like Russell's vipers. So not just tapping, but making a movement, especially in grass and stuff, is a good thing to do, and that will chase them away. No snake wants to pick a fight, and yeah.
So this is from a place of where I want to learn. So I've been working with the community. I won't use the word community, but working with the tribals of the Soliga community for past 2 years. So it's in their daily way of life where they encounter a lot of things. But a person from so-called city space to go, my initial response is fear. So I stop and I don't know how to respond and also react. So also I'm an educator, so I have to teach children. Now that you're saying you dislocating them and all that is something very new to me. So where do we pick up? Where do we let go of this fear and this inhibition towards something like a snake and start learning about and also see them as something that we are part of? So that perspective also. And also a personal instance, like how did it start for you? Did it always start with a fascination or did it move from fear to fascination?
Okay, the first thing about the Soligas, I would be kidding myself if I were to, think that I could tell a Soliga how best to live with wildlife. They are all tribe folk. As long as they're in their own space, are light years ahead of us in their understanding of how to live within an ecosystem without causing it to be destroyed or without destroying it completely. And I think that there's very little that you need to teach them there. You might need to teach them about our ways of life and point out how terrible they are. But I think they're actually fine. Yeah. Okay.
So when they are very casually like handling it and stuff like that.
Yes.
When I'm with them, I do not know if what they're doing is the right thing to do or how do I like learn from certain things.
Okay, so that's. Mm-hmm.
Hesitance towards it.
Yeah.
So how do we?
If they're handling an animal, that is a difficult one. And that's not something that I can answer for you also. But what I can tell you is that, so there are interactions between individuals, and there's interactions between an individual and an ecosystem, and there's interaction between systems within larger systems. The interactions between individuals, sometimes at least we might find that many tribe folk lack sensitivity to the welfare of an animal. But again, it's so much deeper than just what we see. So I wouldn't question it upfront. And it's definitely not something that we can broad brush. So it's not something that I can give you, this is my opinion, because each one of those is different. With individuals and a system, if you think about it, the Soligas have lived in BR Hills for how long? They still have tigers, right? We, in Mysore, we shot out the last tiger, I don't know when. Must have been around the 1960s or so, 1970s maybe even. But we now go to the Soligas and we say, listen, the state owns your forests, so we'll tell you how to live, which I think is not particularly, well, for one, on various levels, I think it's not the best ethical approach. I also feel it's a very dysfunctional approach because they've really done what's best all this time for BRT. As for my beginning, I don't know. My mum and my preschool teacher tell me that on a trip to Sundarban, which is a snake park in Ahmedabad, I must have been 3, and apparently I climbed into the python enclosure. But I also went with our maid to her village and came back with ticks and stuff also. It wasn't particularly well guided or anything. I was never very good in school. I was always better out in the wild. So.
Can we have the rest of the questions and the authors? Okay. Sir, there's a child here with a question.
Yeah, right there. You can shout it out to me. I know you can shout.
Sir?
Oh, this child, okay. Can we do both children? Thank you. Yes. Sorry.
If we are near a snake, how can we at least shoo them away when they should not come near and not dare to bite?
The best way to shoo a snake away is to look big and look like you're moving a lot, so it sees you. If you stand still, the snake might not register you as the dainty little thing that you are, right? You need to be a little more visible and move a little bit, and that'll help the snake see you. And once the snake sees you, it won't come near you.
If snake bites, if the first bite will be poisonous, then the second bite will be also poisonous?
Two things: don't get bitten twice by the same snake. Or also, no. So snake venom is like your saliva. It's produced in a gland, and then it's also stored inside a venom sac. So, and snakes give out tiny, tiny bits of venom. It's a very powerful protein. So it can bite many, many times. So don't do this research. It's been done already. Okay? And yeah. So, all right. And no, sir, there are no amphibious snakes. There are snakes that can swim, but they have to breathe from air. Amphibians are able to breathe underwater as well. Yeah.
So, can we take the rest of the questions outside? We're running out of time.
Give information on how people can recognize whether it's a venomous bite or a non-venomous bite.
Okay, so everything that you see on Google about the fang marks and the shape and pattern of the bite, don't listen to it. Okay, it's terrible. The only way to actually know whether a bite is venomous or not is by symptoms, or if you know that what snake species has bitten you. So you need to get to a hospital after having taken out anything that might be constrictive, like rings, friendship bands, bangles, watches. Just get to a hospital as safely as possible and relate to the doctor without the added details of which movie you were going to see or who you were with. Just what time you were bitten, where you were bitten, and the doctor will take it on. By and large, do not go to fancy hospitals to be treated because they do not get snake bite victims there. Go to missionary hospitals. JSS here is fantastic, so definitely go there. Don't get bitten. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.